I enrolled at the University of Chicago in September of 2007, a fresh-eyed, dough-faced 18-year-old with delusions of cinematic grandeur. I was gonna be the next Martin Scorsese, or at least that's what my voicemail said for 6 months. And within a year of enrolling, I had committed to majoring in film. Well, not film exactly. Cinema and media studies. So UChicago didn't offer any film production classes when I went there. Back then it was all theory. We'd spend weeks talking about Apollonian and Dionysian dialectics, but good luck figuring out how to rack focus. In fact, UChicago was so bad at offering any real-world training in film production that when one of my professors tried to explain the 180-degree rule, he got it wrong. He drew the diagram up on the board with the line running between the two actors instead of running through them. They're supposed to be straddling an invisible fence. It's an eye-line continuity thing. Now this was a good professor, one of my favorites. I don't think he was incompetent, I think he just had a brain fart. When he stepped back and looked at the board, he could tell he did something wrong, he just didn't know what. But being the painfully shy kid that I was, I couldn't bear the thought of raising my hand in order to try and help him out. Then again, never in my 4 years as an undergrad did I ever feel like speaking up in class ever gave me a better idea what the hell that school ever wanted from me.
Rock stars have kidnapped my son.
Anywho, fast forward 4 years to the summer of 2011. I'm a graduate with honors from the University of Chicago with a bachelor's degree in cinema and media studies. And it was at the film department's graduation party that one of the department heads raised a glass of champagne and shouted, "Good luck getting jobs." I mean, 0 out of 10 for tact, but 11 out of 10 for foresight. So 10 years after graduation, frankly, I am done asking myself what the point of film school was. Because to be perfectly honest, I have bigger things to worry about right now. Next month's rent doesn't care what the point of film school was, and my student loans sure as shit don't care. In fact, it was really only about 2 years after graduation, right about the time when I realized I wasn't gonna parlay my degree into a Hollywood screenwriting gig, that I stopped asking myself what the point of UChicago was and got to work making YouTube videos and independent films. And I haven't looked back ever since. Literally. I've only been back to campus 3 or 4 times in the past decade, and only for things that had nothing to do with being a former student. So why am I asking the question now? Well, as I get older, and a big chunk of my audience stays stuck around their late teens, early 20s, I figured there may be some viewers out there who are trying to decide for themselves whether or not they should get a film degree, who might actually want to know what I have to say about this subject. And so I thought I'd put my thoughts into a video. And my answer is, it depends on what you want it for. First things first, nobody ever got a job in Hollywood just because they had a film degree. Nobody. Not one single solitary human being person. But wait, what about the Hollywood brats? Didn't Steven Scorsese, Martin Spielberg, Brian De Coppola, and Francis Ford Palma all graduate from film schools? Well, no, actually. Hardly any of them got undergraduate degrees in film, and some of them had no formal film education whatsoever. Spielberg only finished his film degree in 2002, which, can you imagine looking over in your film studies class and seeing the guy who just directed Catch Me If You Can? But it's not like he needed the degree to continue working in the industry. He didn't even need the degree to start working in the industry. Know how Spielberg got his first job in Hollywood? He got a 3-day visitor's pass to the Universal lot, dressed up in a suit and tie like he had a job there, and then on day 4, he bluffed his way past the security guard. Nobody ever got a job in Hollywood just because they got a film degree. Well, a film school can't hurt though, right? I mean, don't a lot of filmmakers graduate from Columbia, USC, UCLA? Well, yeah, but so do a lot of personal assistants, flight attendants, and customer service representatives. And I'm not knocking those careers. I'm just saying film school is hardly a guarantee. When I was an intern out in LA, UCLA would send over these little pitch packets every summer, which contained all the log lines for all the unproduced screenplays that their graduating class had written that year. And every year they went straight into the bin. Nobody accepts unsolicited materials, not even from UCLA. You can still go to these schools and no doubt receive a top-flight education, and probably increase your chances of finding work in Hollywood, but a career is anything but guaranteed. Film school confers but 2 possible benefits, as far as I can tell. It can give you access to actual filmmaking equipment, which you can use to try and make a good reel in order to find work, or it can help you tap into a network of possible industry connections. But see, the key words here are access, possible, try. Say it with me, folks. Nobody ever got a job in Hollywood just because they got a film degree. If you want to major in film as a way to try and get your foot in the door, you gotta either lean into those industry connections or try to make as good a reel as possible before you graduate. And for whatever it's worth, I tried and failed at both of these endeavors. But for purely educational purposes, let's go ahead and discuss my attempts. As I said before, UChicago is not big on actual filmmaking. They had no film production classes when I was there, and the Student Film Society, Fire Escape Films, was, I didn't have the best experience with them. They agreed to loan me some equipment so that I could shoot an independent feature film. But when I turned in the equipment after the first day of shooting so that they could go ahead and get the footage out of the camera for me, I never heard from them again. For what it's worth, I don't consider this entirely their fault. I was told they never shot feature-length films, that mine would be the first. And I was well aware by the end of day one that it was going to take way more time and energy for me to make this thing than I ever imagined. I was in over my head, they were in over their head, and I swear I don't bear them any ill will for reading the writing on the wall and ghosting me. But the point is that the University of Chicago was entirely unequipped in pretty much any capacity to teach anyone, much less me, all the ins and outs of film production while I was there. And if you're wondering why I didn't just apply to a real film school, one that would actually teach me how to light a scene and rack focus, well, I did. I applied to the FSU Film School, but they rejected me. As simple as that. I guess I could have applied to more than just one. But I wasn't so convinced at 17 that I'd become a filmmaker that I was willing to bet it all on something like UCLA. I also didn't like FSU's attitude very much. Now, I know how that sounds. They didn't dump me, I dumped them. But look, I was told in the interview that I couldn't miss a single day of class. That one time a student asked if they could fly home for a funeral and the administrators gleefully forbade it. They also told me I wouldn't even be able to touch a camera until I was an upperclassman, and that I would only get one chance to direct something my senior year. When I asked if I could watch anything that their students had ever actually made, they said no, absolutely not unless I enrolled. So even before the rejection arrived, I was like, maybe it's okay if I don't go here. Plus, there are worse bullets to dodge than being stuck in Tallahassee for 4 years. Now, I have met people who love their time at FSU, but I don't think it would have been the right place for me. So after graduating from UChicago with no working knowledge of film production, I wound up leaning into the alumni network to try and find work. Which did not go splendidly. This was in 2011, back when large segments of the whole industry were being laid off. Half the people I reached out to were like, I'm not working either, buddy. So it's probably no surprise I wasn't able to find work this way. And that's fine. I want to emphasize that right up front. I'm not blaming the alumni network for not finding me any work. I get it. I am now a part of that alumni network, and I would be professionally useless to anyone who reached out to me. Best I can do is this YouTube video. But you know, even getting a response from these people was enough to help keep my chin up. It was a real shot in the arm. And it's not even like I was doing a whole lot to incentivize responding. I am a little embarrassed by some of the emails that I sent back in those days. In hindsight, they stunk of entitlement and desperation. I remember one time a guy offered to read the first act of one of my scripts with the understanding that if he liked it, he would go ahead and ask for the rest. But then I went and sent him the first 50 pages. He wrote back like, I don't even have to read the first page and I know this is too long. Another time, I sent 3 different scripts to a producer, and when I didn't get a response within a few weeks, I sent him another script that I knew wasn't any good just so that I'd have an excuse to check in for an update. And of course, that's the script that he wound up reading. I deserved that rejection, let me tell ya. I don't think any of them know me by this channel. Like, I don't think any of them keep tabs on me or anything. But just in case they are, and they're watching this video right now, I just want to say one more time, I can't thank you enough for listening to a clueless, desperate kid and lending him a sympathetic ear. I was absolutely terrified by my lack of progress in those days. And just knowing that there were people out there who would be happy to see me join the industry one day made me feel like I was at least on the same planet as my dreams. To this day, my one iota of actual industry experience is the 2 summers that I spent interning in LA. And those 2 summers were positively magical. They were even paid. Not a living wage, but tax-free. And for whatever it's worth, I look forward to the day when I can finally pay it forward. But anyway, the point of all these silly sob stories is that film school did not secure me a job within the industry. And as far as I know, They don't secure anyone a job in the industry. But let's say you're not counting on snagging an industry job after film school. Say you just want to teach. Might it then be a good idea to pursue a film degree? Well, now you're in an even bigger conundrum. Because yes, while it's true you pretty much do need a degree in film in order to teach film, a teaching gig is far from a sure thing either though. In mid-2013, 2 years after graduation, when I was probably at my most desperate, I went and did a thing that I'm not insanely proud of. I applied to some PhD film programs. Not UCLA or USC or anything. I wasn't setting my sights that high, just a couple local programs in Chicago. But one of them was UChicago, my alma mater, which had just awarded me a degree in cinema and media studies with honors. So I figured how much of a long shot could it be? Well, I didn't get in. They sent me a rejection letter for their PhD program, and then in that same letter, they encouraged me to apply to their master's program instead, which is basically their way of saying, we're not going to pay you to study, but you could pay us. Anyway, again, I swear I don't bear them any ill will for rejecting me, because ultimately, I think I would have been unhappy there too. I didn't have a fantastic time studying film at the University of Chicago, in part because I never really knew what I was supposed to take from any of my classes. We weren't making films, we weren't even deciding if we liked them. That was drilled into us from the very beginning, that we weren't trying to decide whether or not any film was good. I remember one kid said in class one day that he really liked the film we happened to be studying, and the teacher came down on him like the gorilla in Baby's Day Out. No subjective judgment calls. And I'm not opposed to that philosophy as a rule, but one I take issue with is that nobody ever told us what we were trying to decide instead. I remember spending lots of time classifying things, like the difference between sci-fi and horror. Which tropes are associated with which? What tendencies do they exhibit? Well, the monsters of science fiction tend to be defeated through teamwork and cooperation, whereas the monsters of horror are usually defeated by just one or two people on their own. Yeah, fuck you too! Science fiction monsters tend to represent threats to society at large, whereas horror monsters tend to represent threats to the psyche. I shall tell you all. Things like that. But I was never sure what I was supposed to do with any of these observations. Like, you could ask your professor if Alien is a science fiction or a horror, and they'd be like, well, it exhibits tendencies from both genres. And you'd be like, okay, so what do we think about that? And the professor would be like, what do we think about what? Like, we'd read 40 pages of some scholar's analysis, and then we'd talk for an hour or an hour and a half about the differences between self-awareness and self-reflexiveness in postmodern cinema, and then we'd watch a movie, and maybe it belonged to one category, and maybe it belonged to the other, and then we'd move on. I was always left searching for the big so what. In hindsight, I don't know if we were ever trying to decide anything, and that made paper writing a complete crapshoot. I never knew what anyone wanted from me, never had any idea what kind of grade I could expect, and it can be fun to explore a bunch of random thoughts about film without any consideration as to what you're supposed to write. That can be great. I know if I were a teacher, I would encourage my students to follow random trains of thought and just see where they lead. But then my papers would come back with like a C and I'd be like, well, what was I supposed to write? Of course, some classes were better about this than others, and there were 3 professors in particular who I really liked. But ultimately, my 3.64 area of study GPA reflects how well I randomly vibed with my professors' predetermined expectations. That's all. It indicates no skills mastered, no schools of thought conquered, no specific concepts understood. I wrote random musings on various film topics for 4 years, and 3.64 out of 4 professors just happened to like what I was on about. And maybe that doesn't sound so bad, 3.64 out of 4. But what happened was, I got B's and C's throughout my first 3 years of college, and then randomly pulled straight A's my 4th year to help pull my grades out of a nosedive. So, teaching in that environment? Probably not the best place for me. Don't get me wrong, I would love to teach a course on film. I would have such a time with that. Let's talk about how militarism is utilized for all sorts of different political purposes throughout science fiction. Think Independence Day versus Starship Troopers.
We're going to survive! We're gonna die!
Let's talk about how verticality is used to convey theme in films that are set in cities. Let's talk about how lies and deception tend to drive the plots of most romantic comedies from the golden age of Hollywood, whereas now they tend to focus more on issues of personal compatibility.
3 days ago, I loathed you.
I could talk for 10 weeks about any of those topics easy. And hey, if any film school agrees, My DMs are open, but just from my limited experience within the University of Chicago Film Department, I got the distinct impression that my idea of what makes a film course interesting and valuable would not fit in within their academic philosophy. These are not the kinds of discussions we had in any of my film classes. All we'd talk about was... Man, it's hard to even summarize what we would talk about because there was just so little for you to hang your hat on. I mean, how do you summarize the point of this? If we study the discussions bequeathed us by the past, we realize that a work is said to have verisimilitude in relation to two chief kinds of norms. The first is what we call rules of the genre. For a work to be said to have verisimilitude, it must conform to these rules.
Oh wait, there's a lot more.
But there exists another verisimilitude, which has been taken even more frequently for a relation with reality. Aristotle, however, has already perceived that the verisimilar is not a relation between discourse and its referent, the relation of truth, but between discourse and what readers believe is true. I do want to say, for the record, that by my 4th year, I had apparently gotten the hang of writing academic papers, since I did have a grand old time writing my BA thesis, and my professors did go ahead and award me honors. So I'm assuming they were pretty okay with it too. It was all about The Thing.
Who's that?
How it instills a sense of dread and distrust in everything from the camera work and editing to the narrative metaphors.
You're gonna have to sleep sometime, McCready.
I'm a real light sleeper, child.
In fact, for all I know, mentioning it here might finally serve as the impetus for me to turn it into a proper video essay. Video is the only medium I ever want to teach film in, too, by the way. That's another reason why I don't think teaching film in school would be the right fit for me. Talking about film, or worse, reading mere descriptions of film, is just a piss-poor way to study cinema. Maybe it's changed since I was in school, but I wouldn't want to teach a course on film unless I was able to queue up clips on the fly and actually watch them throughout each lecture. That's part of the reason why I'm so big on playing clips to try and illustrate my points in all of my videos. I'd spent 4 years listening to talking heads in darkened rooms describe film and film concepts to me, and I'd had my fill of it long before I ever started a YouTube channel. So getting a film degree won't guarantee you a job in the industry, and it also won't guarantee you a teaching gig, which you might not even enjoy anyway. So where does that leave us? Why else would anyone want to get a film degree? Well, I'm not saying anyone should. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't get anything from it. It didn't snag me a job, it didn't snag me a career, but there's still one massive benefit I got from it. I just enjoyed studying film for 4 years. I liked watching movies and calling it homework. I liked thinking about film in new ways, even if some of those ways wound up being not all that interesting. Now, I know some of you are like, well, you don't need to go to school for that. And you're right. There is nothing preventing anyone from simply doing the reading on their own time. I've still got all the syllabuses. Syllabuses? Syllabi. Syllabi? Syllabodes. I've still got all the reading lists. What's to stop anyone from simply reading the collected works of Carol Clover, Robin Wood, and Vivian Sobchak on their own time in order to learn about film? Well, nothing. But you will have to do it on your own time, whereas I did it in college, where I didn't have to worry about day jobs, housing, commuting, meal prep, or all the other drudgery that comes with being a working stiff. I mean, theoretically, I still didn't need to go to college for that. I could have, theoretically, just lived with my parents for 4 years while studying film, but I wouldn't have had a degree by the end of it. And having a degree in anything is very useful in terms of snagging a day job while you pursue creative interests in your spare time.
You know, for kids.
Ooh. That's pretty damning faint praise, isn't it? My education is no better than 4 years at the public library, except for the fact that I got a degree, which I've been using to work traumatic and dispassionate day jobs for the last decade in order to pay off the debt that I incurred, whilst earning the degree. Okay, but some of these complaints are about capitalism, not college. Are we off topic? I think we're off topic. Ultimately, I'm not a big fan of asking myself, oh, if I could go back and do it all over again, would I do anything different? Because the answer is always, yeah, everything. I wish I hadn't gone to such an expensive school. I still have about 10% of my original debt yet to pay off. I wish the faculty had given two shits about student health and safety while it was there. I wish the university hadn't walled itself off from the surrounding neighborhoods with an army of private cops and discriminatory zoning laws. I wish the campus had more food options. I wish like hell I'd have had a transit pass. That'd have changed my life. I wish I'd have used the free gym more often. I wish I'd have gone to more parties. I wish I'd have tried harder to make friends. But having 4 years to just watch, read, and think about film, with no other obligations to bog me down, was pretty damn magical. I can't pretend it wasn't. That's what the money bought me. Did I overpay? Absolutely. Did I need to go to college in order to make that happen? Probably not. Could I have tried harder to get into an actual film school and learn how to make actual films instead of just studying them? I don't know, probably. But I honestly wasn't ready to commit 100% to the idea of being a filmmaker when I was just 17, so I'm not going to beat myself up over it now. If I could return my degree for a full refund and use the money to make an independent film instead, would I go for it? See, that's exactly the kind of hypothetical that makes no sense for me to ask. I didn't know how to make a film at 18. Maybe I can now, but what I needed back then wasn't a budget, it was just practice. But hey, brass tacks. Should you go to film school? Well, I can't make that call for you. All I can do is post all my old reading lists in the description of this video and then at least save you that debate.
Hello, my friends, I'm teacher, okay? But why do we really have to study all day? We'll see how I'm to scam, and I'll tell you how we ended up with a fall that we know now. A town was invented to keep the kids in the hall. They gave it a name, and we now know it as fall. The banana of the story that I have presented. Fall is just something that grown-ups invented.
Nobody ever got a job in Hollywood just because they got a film degree. I have no clue how to say that and make it sound natural. Make it feel natural. I have no clue what to do with my body. Nobody ever got a job in Hollywood just because they got a film degree. I think this is the wrong call. I think I'm closing myself off. My fridge just kicked on. It's gonna be fun in post. Tommy. Thomason. There's a cat just out of frame. Hi, you want to say hi? You want to say hi? You want to come down and say hi? Walking away now.